Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time to join us today. My name is Jamal Wilson, and I work with the FAA Surveillance and Broadcast Services Group. If you were with us just a few short days ago, as part of the FAA's Summer Safety Series, we engaged my ADSB teammates and I in a very informative and engaging topic as it relates to the public ADSB performance report and how to use that to ensure that your ADSB equipment is working properly. On that same vein, what we want to do today is talk with you about another very, very important topic, and that is the topic of call sign mismatch, specifically what it is, why it matters, and how to avoid it. Before we dig into that, I'd like to take a minute for my ADSB teammates to come on and introduce themselves.
Hey, good afternoon, Jamal. My name is Jim Kenny. I'm an aviation safety inspector with the Flight Operations Group and FAA's Flight Standard Service.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ty Prettyman, and I support the Avionics Maintenance Division of the FAA's Flight Standards Division.
Hi, and I'm Jim Wright. I am an engineer with the FAA's ADSB program.
Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome again. What we want to do now is talk a little bit more about call sign mismatch. And like I said before, Jim Kenny is here with us today, and he is our call sign mismatch guru. For any of our attendees who might have stopped by the ADSB booth during any of the outreach events such as Sun and Fun, Oshkosh, and AOPA Flying, you'll know and recognize Jim Kenny's face as a call sign mismatch expert, as well as the rest of us as in discussions with ADSB. With that said, Jim Kenny's the expert, so I'm going to turn it over to him. Jim, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Jamal. So today we're going to talk about call sign mismatch and basically how to avoid it. Okay, so probably a lot of you out there in the audience have got ADSB out transceivers that have a flight ID field that can change by you, the pilot. It's important to understand why the ADSB flight ID must exactly match the aircraft ID entered on a flight plan or used during ATC communications. So I'm going to bring up some slides here to fill you in on everything you need to know about call sign mismatch. It's coming. Okay, so ready to get started. First of all, let's talk about a call sign. What exactly is a call sign? I think everybody's probably familiar with that, but we use some different terms. We use the term call sign, we use the term flight ID, we use the term aircraft ID. They all pretty much mean the same thing. So for most general aviation operators, your call sign, your flight ID, your aircraft ID is simply your N number. This could vary if you're doing some other types of flying we'll talk a little bit about later. But the call sign that is being transmitted by your ADSB out, as we call a flight ID, must exactly match the aircraft ID that's provided on your flight plan. If they match, you're in good shape. If they don't, we have what we call a call sign mismatch, okay? Call sign mismatch is one of 19 bits of information being transmitted by your ADSB transceiver, so it is an important part of the system. So why is this important? Well, it's important because ADSB in functionality that's coming down the road here within the next few years does require positive identification of participating aircraft. So for example, if you're in an aircraft and you're told to follow somebody else, you must be able to identify that aircraft. The way that you identify that aircraft is by the flight ID that they are transmitting. So if it's not correct, then we have problem participating with this particular function, such as one test project we've got is the San Francisco closely spaced parallel approaches. Second reason why this is important is call sign mismatch does cause an alert for air traffic control, which is a distraction, especially when they're busy. This is when the functions are enabled. Currently, they are not enabled at most facilities, but that is something that will change in the not too distant future. Thirdly, it is a regulatory requirement. 227D8 will provide that information. It talks about all of the elements that must be broadcast by your ADSB out transceiver. So the question that comes up is, how does it actually happen? Okay, so probably the majority of the problems that we see with GA aircraft is when the flight ID field of the ADSB out transceiver is programmed incorrectly. So typically this is during installation. Sometimes it will have been inadvertently changed by the pilot because they were in the menu looking for something else. But this is something that is not uncommon. We see a lot of data transmissions by aircraft which indicate the flight ID is something like ADSB test or maybe a series of numbers. Those are normally the pre-programmed fields by the manufacturers. So that's one way if it's not done correctly from the start. The second way that's also fairly common is there are many great organizations out there in the system that use unique call signs or ICAO type call signs like Angel Flight, Animal Rescue Flights, Coast Guard Auxiliary Air, and pilots use these special call signs for the missions and then forget to reprogram them or maybe reprogram them incorrectly back to their registration number after the mission is completed. And then the third area to be focused on is maintenance events. We've seen a number of maintenance events where the battery is disconnected or where power is taken off of the avionics, where this causes the ADSB, the flight ID field in the ADSB transceiver to reset back to manufacturer's default settings. So in this case, it would certainly be a wise idea to double check to make sure that it is transmitting correctly after that maintenance event. So we frequently get asked how significant is the call sign mismatch issue. So we're just going to talk about GA aircraft today because that's who the audience is designed for. During the month of May 2021, ATC reported 2,293 call sign mismatches by GA aircraft in the National Airspace System. So this is 50 states plus territories of the US. And a total of 2,293 or approximately 75 per day. Okay, it is not uncommon to have multiple call sign mismatches from one aircraft because very often, if the flight ID is set incorrectly, the aircraft flies numerous flights, it will be tracked for each one. So what this means is we probably end up with about 1,000 aircraft that are involved in this every single month. What we do to try to remedy it is Flight Standards makes an attempt to contact aircraft owner by telephone, advise them of the issue, help them through some corrective action. And that seems to be working reasonably well. So we're going to continue doing that. Hopefully we can get that number down even lower here in the next 6 months or so. Okay, we frequently get asked, how do we verify that the flight ID is correct, which is really a very good question. The only way to do this is to request a free public ADSB performance report, or as we call a paper report, from the FAA. You simply type in your Google search engine, public ADSB performance report. It'll take you right to the field where you can enter your data. We just had a webinar on this subject, very comprehensive one a couple of days ago, so that's available as well. But that will give you a detailed report, no charge. And not only will it tell you if your flight ID is correct, it'll give you a lot of additional information on your ADSB transceiver. So it's a good tool to take advantage of. Second thing we get asked very frequently is, should I ask a controller to verify that my flight ID is correct or my ADSB is working correctly? And the answer there is no, for numerous reasons, primarily because the controllers don't have access to this detailed information. This is all housed in a different facility, and we don't burden the controllers with it. In addition, it does cause frequency congestion, which is not good. The controllers don't appreciate that. So we would appreciate just run the free report, and that would be your best source of information. Okay, just a couple of best practices, with regard to call sign mismatch, making sure your flight ID is correctly. So we start out at the very beginning. So after the ADSB out is installed in your aircraft, if you simply verify that the flight ID is correctly by obtaining a free paper report, public ADSB performance report, that will tell you that everything is good to go. Many installers now are issuing those reports after they install, which is really a great practice. So that's one option. The second and probably the most significant, after you make sure that it's set correctly, is if you change your flight ID for special missions like Angel Flight, be sure to reset the flight ID after the mission is completed. Also, if the aircraft that you fly is flown by many other pilots or any other pilots, it's a good idea to check it periodically to make sure that somebody else was not in the menu and made a change. And then the third issue is simply request that free report once a year. We like to suggest before your annual inspection, make sure your flight ID is correct, and everything else with the ADSB is certainly a good practice. That's it, Jamal.
Excellent, Jim. Thank you for that. It's definitely a very informative briefing. I'm sure a lot of folks will be able to use this information. What we want to do now, while we have the team here, is transition to the Q&A portion of our webinar. And that's where the attendees that are here today, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask the team, you can submit them. And what we'll do is we'll try and answer as many of those as we possibly can in the time that we have left allotted in our webinar today. So as I scroll through where our web feed is, I see the questions are already starting to roll in. So let me go ahead and ask the first one. And Jim Kenny, I mean, you're the expert. So of course, this one's going to be for you. So let me make sure I read this correctly. It says, can you provide an example of what would cause a call sign mismatch?
I sure can, Jamal. That's a good question. So as an example, suppose a pilot uses their aircraft to fly missions in support of public benefit organizations such as Angel Flight. Okay, most of the time, they will broadcast their aircraft registration number, such as November 12345, broadcast that in their ADSB, use that in their flight plan as an aircraft ID. But when they fly a mission in support of Angel Flight, they have the option to broadcast the Angel Flight ICAO ID, which is NGF, and then a series of numbers following that, and then use the approved Angel Flight call sign in ATC communications, which is perfectly acceptable. To achieve this, ensure your ADSB equipment allows the pilot to make changes from flight to flight. So in other words, make sure your ADSB out equipment allows the pilot to make these changes. And then once the flight is completed, be sure to change that Angel Flight ID or flight ID back to your normal registration number when you're doing your normal flying after that.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that, Jim. While you were answering that, another question came in reference to some of the bigger operators out there. And the question reads, I operate a Gulfstream. Do I need to be concerned if I have 2 ADSB units installed? Would you mind taking a minute to kind of clarify on that, Jim?
That's really a good, more advanced question for folks that are operating a larger aircraft. So absolutely. Many of the larger aircraft, transport category aircraft, do have multiple transponders and therefore multiple ADSB units installed. So it is important that you check the performance of both units. So it's a frequent practice, for example, to operate transponder number 1, call it ADSB number 1, on odd number days, and number 2 on even number days. Each one of them has been programmed with data and must be checked to be sure that it is correctly. We have seen numerous occasions where one of those ADSB out transceivers was not programmed correctly and caused a problem on every other flight. So it is a very good idea to, in this case, run 2 paper reports, one after a flight where you've used the number 1 transponder, ADS-B, and the second one after you've used the number 2 transponder ADS-B combination. That'll give you a complete picture as to how your equipment is operating.
Excellent answer. I appreciate that. And I know a lot of us only dream of the day where we can operate a platform robust enough to require 2 ADS-B units. But for those that do, I mean, congratulations for one, but that information should easily help you to do that performance. We have another question that came in, and it looks like it's from somebody in the air taxi community, the Part 135 community, Jim, and it reads, I fly Part 135 air taxi flights. Is using the T prefix, for example, Tango November 123 Alpha Bravo, is that required? Would you mind answering that?
Not at all, Jamal. That's another good subject. Very good question. Is it required? The answer is no, it's not required. If you look at the Aeronautical Information Manual, it will say that this is an option for air taxi pilots to use a Tango prefix. This is something that we've been doing for many years, and some people like to do it, some people don't like to do it. A couple things to think about with this, though. First of all, is using that Tango prefix does not provide any benefit for the pilot as compared to using the medevac prefix when you're doing an air ambulance flight, which does provide you some priority handling, for example. So it doesn't provide any kind of special handling for the pilot, for the aircraft. But what it does do is it makes your likelihood of having a call sign mismatch higher, because many pilots do not realize that if they put the Tango November 123 Alpha Bravo, as in your example, if they file their flight plan that way, which is perfectly acceptable, then to be correct with regard to call sign mismatch, or correct with regard to flight ID, maybe is a better way to say it, they would need to program into their ADS-B Tango November 123 Alpha Bravo. And then for the return trip, if they're coming back Part 91, then they would simply eliminate the Tango, go back. But it's just an additional step that pilots would have to remember, be trained on, for no additional benefit, in my opinion.
Okay, no, that's a good answer. You bring up valid points, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. Jimmy Wright, I want to put this next question on you because we're talking about call sign mismatch and making sure that what your airplane is putting out is correct. And, you know, diametrically opposed to that is anonymity, right? Making sure nobody can see you. And so the question is, what do I do if I want to be anonymous? Jimmy, would you mind taking a couple minutes to expound on that? And it looks like you're muted, Jimmy. There you go.
I got it. Thanks. So yes, we have a couple of systems in place for those who want to fly anonymous, depending on how you're equipped with your ADS-B. For UAT operators, there is an anonymous mode function that is part of your UAT avionics. And when this is enabled, your UAT will send anonymous identity information as part of your ADS-B message. So an anonymous flight ID and an anonymous ICAO code will be sent by your UAT. Now, you need to be squawking 1200, and you can't be using any air traffic services in order to fly an anonymous mode. So those are the only restrictions. For 1090 equipped aircraft, we have a program called the Privacy ICAO Address program. We do have a website, and the way I always find it is I do a search for FAA Privacy ICAO Address. This website tells you everything about the program, and the way it works, just in brief here, is you go up to the website and apply for a Privacy ICAO address and meet all the requirements that are in there. And then we issue you a private ICAO address that can be programmed into your transponder. This private ICAO address can't be linked back to your airplane through the aircraft registry site. So it gives you some level of anonymity from the public. So when you are flying with your ADS-B Privacy ICAO address, you must remain in domestic US airspace. It's only available for 1090 US registered aircraft. So that's just a brief rundown of the two options for you for anonymous mode.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. Like you said before, accessing the PIA website for folks who want to, on the 1090 side, use that anonymity feature while still being in contact with ATC. That is a wealth of information is available on that website. And folks will be able to kind of utilize that to maintain that anonymity they're talking about. So thank you for that. Yeah, good answer. Jim, Kenny, I'm going to go back to you for the next question because it looks like it's talking about best practices. The question as it reads is, what are some best practices to avoid call sign mismatch?
Yeah, thanks, Jamal. Certainly, sort of talked about some of this stuff before. So really the first step in best practices is make sure your flight ID is correct. So post-installation, get that paper report, public ADSB performance report, be certain that your flight ID is correct. That gives you a good baseline to work on. Then depending upon how you use your aircraft, whether you participate in special missions, angel flight and things like that, or whether possibly you have part of a flying club, something where multiple people fly the aircraft, that's something to pay particular attention to. If it's either yourself or other people are changing the flight ID, then it's a good idea to make sure that it's broadcasting correctly prior to takeoff. And then thirdly, really is every year prior to your annual inspection, it's a very, very good practice to run a paper report, double check not only the flight ID, but also the other ADSB parameters. This way, if there's anything not functioning correctly, you can take it to your mechanic and have that corrected. Another kind of an interesting point is some ADSB out avionics actually do not allow the pilot to change the flight ID, or they have a setting during installation where that flight ID field can be locked. So depending upon what the parameters are and how your system has been set up, this may or may not allow you to utilize different flight IDs. So it is something to be thinking about. Know your equipment, know what its capabilities are. And then if you've got an ADSB that does not allow the flight ID to be changed, then really to comply with the regulation, you need to use your registration number. That's it.
No, that's a very, very good point. Speaking personally, my aircraft, my transponder, it's a 1090 ADSB transponder, but it is not programmable, much like what you're saying. So my registration number is fixed, and that is what is being broadcast. And if I were to start doing, pilots for Pauls or angel flights, there'd be an additional consideration I have to make, or like you're talking about, it would just be my N number squawking. Conversely, I have a friend of mine who does angel flight missions, and one of his best practices is he puts in his information twice. So he has a little note in his checklist, and he says, if I make a mistake, the odds of me doing it twice are very, very slim. So he'll put the information twice, and that's how he ensures that what he's supposed to be broadcasting is actually being broadcast. And it's a great idea. It takes him no time, and he's basically just tipping his hat to the human aspect of aviation, right? Aeronautical engineering is an exacting science, but aviation is inherently human. So once you know that you can make a mistake, you just want to kind of employ best practices to mitigate the instances of those mistakes. So great answer, Jim. I appreciate it. While I got your vocal cords warmed up, I'm going to send you another one your way. And it looks like it reads, when I program the flight ID into my ADSB, is the letter 0 and number 0 considered to be the same? That's actually a great question. You want to take a few minutes to talk about that?
Yeah, it won't take a few minutes, Jamal, but that is a really good question. And the answer is no, they're not the same. It is, we see many errors where the letter 0, or the letter O and the number 0 have been transposed. So the answer is they are not the same. It's just like any other digital platform. You need to put in a number 0 when it's a number 0. You need to put in the letter O when it's a letter. So you have to, that's a very, very good point. Something to watch for.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jim. Ty, I'm going to bring you into the mix. It looks like we have a performance reporting question. I know you gave a very, very comprehensive and informative briefing on Tuesday. as it relates to the public ADSB performance report. So I want to bring you in for this one. And the question as it reads is, how do I check to make sure my ADSB equipment is working properly? You want to dig into that a little bit, Ty?
Sure, happy to do that, and I'm glad to be able to do it. So as Jim Kenny mentioned several times, the best way to make sure you are not having a call sign mismatch is to check your ADSB performance. And the best way, really the only way to thoroughly do that, is to go on to the FAA free website where it will check your ADSB performance. And the easiest way to find that website is to simply put into a search engine, Google, most people use, ADSB performance report, and that will bring up a website. And for that website, you will need some information. You will, of course, need the date of your flight. And the times for all of these flights in our system are UTC time. So convert your local time to UTC. And for those of you on the West Coast flying later in the day, your UTC day will in fact be the next day. So do keep that in mind. You will also need the kind of equipment that you have on board for ADSB. The system asks for that. You will need your email address, your name, and some other information related to how you had that equipment installed, the installer. And once you've submitted that information, it usually takes between 20 minutes and 30 minutes to send you a report by email. And from there, you can tell everything you need to know about your ADSB equipment, including whether you're having a call sign mismatch. So that's it, Jamal. And just to repeat again, to find the website, very easy. Just use Google and type in ADSB performance report. That's it.
Thank you, Ty. I appreciate that. Jim Kenny, I'm going to move back to you now. It looks like we have a flight ID question, and it reads, if I check my flight ID today and it's correct, do I have to worry about call sign mismatch? It's a good question. You want to take a couple seconds to answer?
Sure will, Jamal. So really it depends. It depends on how you're operating the aircraft, depends on what you're doing with your ADSB out. So if you were to check it today and it is transmitting correctly, then the question going forward is, who else is operating the aircraft? Who else is operating the equipment? Or am I participating in different types of flights whereby I will change the flight ID? If you're an individual that owns an aircraft, you always use your N number. You're the only one that flies the aircraft. I would suggest that it is fairly unlikely that you will have an ADSB flight ID problem going forward if you've checked it to make sure that it is correct in the beginning. Now, the one exception to this is we talked before about maintenance events. So if you take the airplane in for an annual, you take it in to have some kind of repair work done, have the battery changed, anything where they're taking the power off the avionics, it's a great idea to double check it afterwards, because as I said, we've seen many times when the ADSB out unit will revert the flight ID field back to whatever is pre-programmed with. So like I said, it really depends. If you've got a lot of people operating the aircraft as part of a flying club, something like that, I would most definitely check it more often. If it was me, I would check it before every flight. But it is certainly always a good idea to run a paper report at least once a year. And this way you can verify that everything is working correctly. Thanks, Jamal.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. We've had several questions during the course of this webinar. And one of them here reads, please advise where the paper on FAA.gov can be found. So I know Jim, Kenny, and Ty both touched on this a little while ago, where the easiest option is normally just to go into Google and type in ADSB or public ADSB performance report. And the first link that pops up is the link to the tool itself. If you wanted to go another way and be specific, the website is www.faa.gov/go/equip ADSB. Now, this is a one-stop shop and there's a lot of information there, but as you scroll down, you're going to see a link for folks that are already equipped. And if memory serves, I believe it says already equipped. Check to see if your equipment is working properly. There's a link right there that's going to take you to the public ADSB performance report. So if you want to access it through FAA.gov, that's the way you want to do it. Otherwise, use Google, type in the information as we've talked about it. It's going to take you right there. That's usually the easiest way to go about doing it. So thanks again for asking, and hopefully that'll get you right there. Going back into our chat session, I do have another question that just came in for Jim Kenny. And the question is this, and when I say this, call sign mismatch, of course, is this a frequent problem in Part 121 operations? I know that's a great question. Jim, you want to take a few minutes on that one?
Well, I could take the rest of the day on that one,
I know
Jamal.
you
Yeah,
could.
it's what I spend most of my day on. So the answer to that question is yes, it is a problem. But it is not anywhere near as big of a problem as it used to be. So let me start out. We started working this issue about 5 years ago. And, you know, obviously with the Part 121 operators, with the number of aircraft that they have, plus the number of flights they have on a given day, the number of call sign mismatches that we would have with Part 121 operators and Part 135 operators as well, we're fairly high. Also, remember that Part 121 operators almost, I hate to say always, but really always use ICAO call signs / flight IDs, which means that they are changing their flight number typically every flight or at least every other flight. So we do have a lot of changing going on. So there was a tremendous amount of education that has taken place within the pilot community. I'll give you an example. We had one fairly large Part 121 carrier that a few years ago had over 3,000 call sign mismatches reported every single month. We brought it to their attention. They took it very seriously, made some corrective action. Last time I checked, they were down to 9. Now, this is an operator that's got lots of airplanes that fly lots of flights every day. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a huge fix for them. And we've had similar experience throughout the Part 121 community, Part 135 community. We have a tendency to work kind of from the biggest guys down to the smaller guys. So we have been talking to some of the smaller Part 135 operators more recently, trying to get them educated on it so that they can get out, let their pilots know, give them some training and so forth. But it has been a problem. It is certainly improving, but it's not done yet.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Jim. Ty, I'm going to pivot to you because we have a performance reporting question as it relates to an aircraft that the pilot may not own. And the question itself reads, I rent planes from a flying club. Can I request the ADSB report, or should I ask the flying club or aircraft owner to request the report?
So yeah, that's a good question. I've never heard it before, and it's an important one. You absolutely can request the report. You will obviously need to know the aircraft tail number and when it flew, whether you flew it or someone else flew it. And that report will be sent to the email address that you put into the request form. I might add, though, that if you get a report back and there are issues, please let the flight school know. Don't keep that a secret, because that ADSB system needs to see some attention and needs to be fixed if there are red boxes. And again, when you get the report, it'll be very clear on how to determine whether there is an issue or not. If there's an issue, let the flight school know. That's it.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Ty. Let me see. Another question that we got, keeping with that theme of information, is where can I go for more information? So what I'll do is, one more time, I'll say that the best place to one-stop shop for information related to call sign mismatch and a plethora of other things ADSB related is the FAA's webpage at www.faa.gov/go/equip ADSB. So you go there and it's going to have all the information that we talked about here in greater detail, along with many other things that you need to know about ADSB. With that being said, it looks as though we're coming up towards the end of our allotted time for this session. And before we break, I would like to take time to thank Jim Kenny, Jimmy Wright, and Ty Prettyman for joining us as our panel experts. You guys, you've put a lot of information out over the past couple of days, useful and helpful information. And I'm sure all the attendees were glad to have your participation and your expertise. So thank you, gentlemen. With that said, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. As I said before, we hope this session will help you to greater understand what call sign mismatch is, why it matters, and most importantly, how to avoid it now and into the future. In the interest of being comprehensive, I will say our website one more time if you want to access additional information on ADSB, or if you have any further questions that pop up that need answering. And that site again is www.faa.gov/go/equip ADSB. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this virtual seminar, and for any of you who joined us for the paper seminar earlier this week. Thank you for joining us for that as well, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.